Check, check. Testing, testing, testing. Can you guys hear me? Is the microphone working? I am really fed up with all of this stuff right now. So let me know if you guys can hear this. I have a feeling it doesn't seem like it's working properly. Can anybody hear me in the chat right now? This is frustrating. Okay, it is working. Can you guys hear me on normal levels? Because it's not showing. Okay, all right. Yeah, this is frustrating. Oh well, we'll get started with it and we'll deal with it. But for whatever reason, I had to go live with YouTube Live and I couldn't do the intro music and my camera's flipped. Very frustrating. This is what happens when I take my computer apart to go to the AHR trade show. Everything gets messed up and it is what it is. So, oh well, for today, my office will be backwards and everything will be like this. So hopefully you guys are doing well. So I'm fresh back from the AHR trade show, had a little bit of time to relax, took the weekend off. Actually, I took the Friday off. See, I got back Thursday. Yeah, I think it was Thursday. Whatever day I took. Oh no, so I took Thursday off and then I was working Friday and then had the weekend off and then obviously today. So but I have to say the AHR trade show, for those that are just tuning in right now, we had some technical difficulties. Everything's messed up right now. All my gear's messed up because of the I had taken everything apart. So it's just a disaster right now. My office is still a dumpster fire. I'm about to take everything. Well, I'm not going to take everything apart, but I am about to go to the HVACR training symposium in Florida too. So it's just a hectic week for me, but it is all good. So I hope you guys are all doing well. Like I started saying, HR trade show last week was amazing. Actually was really nice because I got to take some time off, fly out with my wife, and spend the weekend with her. And then she actually flew home Monday morning to pick up the kids from school. But it was really nice to be able to spend some time with her. And, just it was really cool too, because she got to meet with a lot of my peers, right? And she got to meet a lot of the Sporlin people. She got to meet some of my friends. She got to go to the HVAC Tactical Awards with me, and that was really cool to be able to just to have her be part of this. I'm talking about my wife right now. So the fact that she was able to be part of this and get to see the littlest glimpse. Now, she didn't get to see the HR trade show live, but she did come into the show with me on Sunday to kind of set up the Sporlin booth and get all my audio and studio gear and stuff set up. So it was really cool. I do have to say thanks to Solder Weld and thanks to HVAC Tactical for putting on the HVAC Tactical Awards. That was really cool. It was really neat. For those that are chiming in right now, everything's kind of messed up right now. My camera's flipped. Everything's backwards because my streaming software is not quite working yet. It's really interesting. So I have this whole YouTube thing, right? I put videos on YouTube. I do all this stuff. And I really am not that good with technology. So something's wrong in my streaming software. And it's the same thing. Like I wasn't able to figure it out at the HR trade show too. So I really got to dig down into it. I'm sure it's just a button I need to click, but something got messed up. And for whatever reason, I'm not outputting audio using my normal live streaming software. It is a pain in my butt. I am not that good at all this stuff, but it is what it is. So I hope you guys are all doing well. I am well. I am healthy. My family is healthy. So that's all that I can ask for in these crazy times right now. But, so yeah, the AHR trade show, what an amazing event. I was at the Sporlin booth for a good part of it. It was really cool. Great central meeting place. The Sporlin people are all amazing people. It's great to be able to hang out with them. This is my second event that I've done. The second AHR trade show. The previous one was in Orlando. So, and it was really neat because Sporlin really did it up. They had a full live streaming setup for me, a place to hang out. And it was neat to have a central meeting point for people to come up and say, hey, if you guys are watching this and you don't know what the AHR trade show is, it's an annual show. There's a lot of reasons that they do it. It's a multiple meetings of ASHRAE and all kinds of different stuff. People meet up to have meetings. But on top of that, they do an annual trade show. And originally, this was more for manufacturers and distributors to kind of get together. But they've started bringing in, I wouldn't say the public, but they started bringing in technicians and contractors and stuff. And it's kind of changing shape and kind of going in a different direction. So it's really neat. Attendance was definitely lower than it's ever been, but that's kind of to be expected. The numbers were pretty good. They did have mask mandates. We don't got to get political about that kind of stuff, but I mean, that probably drove a lot of people off, but it was really neat. And I have to say that I think Vegas was a great location to have the AHR trade show. I do have to tell you guys, though, I don't know if I told this story on the overtime show. If you guys don't already know, I do a show on Friday evenings with my friend on the friends on the HVAC overtime YouTube channel. But anyways, I can't remember if I told this story or not, but I went out with some friends. I went out with Gil Cavey from HVAC Uncensored and my buddy Scott. And what was it? Probably Tuesday night, I think, maybe. Yeah, I think it was Tuesday night. We went out and we were hanging out, had dinner, we're drinking and stuff, and we all parted ways. And I was going to hop back on the tram because there's a monorail that runs between the casinos, and I got lost in a casino. Now, to be fair, I'd been drinking, but I literally got lost in a casino for an hour. I was walking in circles. For the life of me, I could not find the tram. I just kept walking in circles over and over and over again. I know the Harris Casino really well now because that was the casino that I got lost in. I didn't gamble though, so I didn't fall into their trap. I know they were trying to trap me in their casino, but it's interesting because for people, I've always heard that casinos do deceptive things to try to keep people in them so they can't tell what time of day it is. They can't see daylight, that kind of stuff. But for someone that was mildly intoxicated, I genuinely realized that they do try to trap you in their casinos because it was just a long story short. But I mean, it was just a long night, but it was just kind of funny because by the time I made it back to my room, it was like midnight. And it was just like, and then on top of that, yeah, to add insult to injury. So I got lost in the casino. And the only place I didn't go was up this escalator that had no signs telling you what was up the escalator. So finally I went up the escalator, and then sure enough, there's the tram entrance. Stupid me. But anyways, so then I make it to the tram and I get on the tram, and then I realize I got on the wrong one and I went the wrong direction. So then I had to get off at the Las Vegas Convention Center exit all by myself. I'm the only people at that tram platform, only person at the tram platform. It was just what a night, but it was such a great weekend, and it was amazing. So as usual, I've got a lot of things I want to talk about. I got a list of things to talk about in front of me. If people are just tuning in right now and they're wondering what the heck is going on, why everything's backwards in my studio, it's because my camera's messed up right now, and I just still trying to set everything up from the trade show. It's just a mess. So real quick, I will be tentatively, I mean, everything seems to be going okay. I will be at the HVACR training symposium for HVAC school in Claremont, Florida here. What is it? Next week? Yeah, I think I leave next week sometime. I think is right. Yeah, whenever it is, I'm going to be there. So myself, and some of the overtime guys, it'll be Adam and Bill, Curious HVAC guy, will be there. Joe will not be there, but we'll see Joe another time. But yeah, we're going to be at the training symposium. So if you guys are going to be in, around the Orlando area, Claremont, Florida is about 45 minutes away. I will be there. Maybe we can figure something out or something like that. Just hit me up on social media. So it should be a great event. If you guys, I believe they're already sold out for the event, I think, but I know that they'll probably still be selling some online tickets. Definitely an event you want to be at, and or even do the online event. I'm sure it'll be a great thing. So let's see, not tram, monorail. There you go. Yeah. So yeah, I just got lost in there. Let's see. No. Okay. So Keep Six is saying on overtime, I said booths went for as high as $1 million. No, that was a little inaccurate. I was told by someone in the past that some manufacturers spent up to $1 million on their booths. I don't know that to be the case this time. I do have to say that it seemed like every manufacturer at the trade show this time did scale it down a little bit from previous years. Orlando, I want to say there was like 50 to 60,000 people at the Orlando event, which was 2 years ago. And some of the booths were definitely bigger at the Orlando event. I think everybody's kind of scaling it down just a little bit because they didn't know how many people were going to be there this time. But I imagine as the years come on, it'll get better and better. Something that was interesting, though, was at the AHR trade show was how exhausted everybody was, right? So any of the social influencers, any of the educators, any of the booth attendees or the booth people running the booths, things like that, we were all exhausted because even though I come from Southern California and we have very dry air, it was extremely dry in Vegas. That and all the smoke and everything from in the casinos, it was just a nightmare. So let's see what else we got going on in here. Yeah, I see a lot of people are waiting for the live stream to start. Yeah, I hold on just a second. Had to launch LAU and switch another one. Audio issues. So people are still waiting for the live stream to start. So someone just messed with me right now. So audio issues. Hold on just one sec. Just search HVACR videos on YouTube. This is actually HVAC reefer guy I'm messaging right now. On YouTube. Sorry about this, guys. I'm not a fan of dead air, but it is what it is, right? All right. So anyways, it was just such a great show. So I'm gonna get to a couple questions here. So as usual, you guys feel free when you guys get the opportunity to send me questions, comments, different things that you want me to cover. Now, I can't always cover this stuff. If you guys have things you want me to cover, put it in the live chat, put it in caps lock. I'll try to get to it. If you, people send me emails and different questions and different things like that all the time, and I try to address them. At least I consolidate a lot of the common questions and try to address them on these live streams. Okay. So, had a couple videos since the last live stream because obviously I skipped a few because of the AHR trade show. So we got a few videos to talk about, but I want to jump into some of these questions. Let me see. Where's a really good one? Because there's a couple good questions that I had on this, and I wanted to cover some certain ones right here. So, let's see. As far as the recent videos, something that I wanted to talk about. So I had a video called "Clean Oil is Overrated and Preventative Maintenance is Not Necessary," I think is what I said. So that was an interesting video because it had a failed head pressure control valve in it. Okay. And I had a lot of questions about the failed head pressure control valve. People seem to blame head pressure control valves, headmasters, whatever you want to call them, because they think that they are constantly failing when in fact, they're just prone to system issues. Okay. When we're not maintaining our equipment, when we're not cleaning the condensers, it's not just going to go off on high head pressure. There's actually internal damage going on inside that system, and that internal damage can wreak havoc on the inside of the system. Okay. So, yes, we have oftentimes high pressure safety controls that will shut the equipment off to protect the compressor. But if a system is consistently running with high head pressure, it's going to start to damage the oil and damage the internal components of the system. So I had a recent video where there was a lot of things going on with the system. We had an iced up evaporator on a walk-in cooler, but then on top of that, I noticed as I was walking away that the head pressure control valve had failed. It was stuck open. Okay. So in that video, I addressed something, and I know a lot of people think this is kind of controversial, but I said there's no point in cutting the pigtail on the head pressure control valve because the failure that I had, clearly something was stuck inside the valve. In my situation, the valve, you guys will have to go back and see the video, but I analyzed the head pressure control valve. I took it apart, and the valve itself was gummed up with black like soot and grime from bad oil in the system. Okay. And that was simply caused because the customer doesn't maintain their equipment. They don't do proper preventative maintenances, and it leads to system failures. Okay. So, when we don't maintain our equipment, like I said, it's not just as simple as it's going to go off on high head pressure, then you reset it, then it turns on. If that consistently happens, you can internally damage the compressor. You can damage the oil in the system. Okay. Is it easy to change oil? In some situations it is, but on hermetically sealed compressors, oftentimes there's no oil port. In my situation, we had a hermetic compressor. There was no oil port in it. Okay. So there's not a whole lot you can do in that situation other than unsweat the compressor, pour the oil out. Now, if you have semi-hermetic compressors, oftentimes there's an oil fill port, and even on some higher end, bigger scroll compressors, there's oil fill ports too, to where you can actually drain all the oil out of the system. Now, on a compressor that has a oil fill port, there's easy ways. What you could do is you could pump the system down, you could recover the charge and leave just a little bit of positive pressure in it. You could open up the oil fill port, drain the oil out of the compressor. There's so many different ways you can do it. But on a hermetically sealed compressor that's welded together or brazed together, there's not a lot of great ways to change the oil. So oftentimes it's not very practical. I've shown in videos where I've taken compressors and tried to pour the oil out, like unsweat them. And honestly, it's not the greatest thing ever, because when you try to pour oil out of the suction line of a compressor, inevitably there's going to be oil on the inside of the copper line that you're going to have to end up brazing another piece of copper to seal it up. And getting oil out of the copper lines, it's not going to make for a good braze joint. So it's not very practical to be doing oil changes on hermetically sealed compressors that do not have oil fill ports. Sometimes you just got to deal with it. And or if you're going to unsweat the compressor, I mean, how much more is the compressor with the amount of labor and time you're going to put into recovering the entire charge? For the most part, on most systems, you have to recover the entire charge to take the compressor out of the picture. Now, there's some situations where they might have ball valves, but again, it's not very common. So majority of the time, you're going to have to go through recovering the charge. You're going to have to change the dryers. You're going to have to unsweat the compressor, and you're going to go through a lot of effort when, you know, for an extra $1,200, you can probably throw a compressor in there depending on the size. So, you know, it's not always practical, and it really depends on where the customer wants to go in those situations. Okay. John Deere fan says, have I dealt with an exhaust fan constantly burning through motors? Yeah, I actually have. So let me cross something off my list real quick. I already talked about that one. So for those that don't know, I have a list sitting in front of me right now, and I usually cross things off. That way I know that I covered those particular subjects. So I actually have on my list to tell a story about an exhaust fan that kept burning through motors. And let me find it on my list so I can cross it off and then get to that one. Let's see. I don't see that one right there. I'm looking. Ah, there we go. So, okay, so it's really important to understand that when you're dealing with exhaust fans. Okay, so let's step back a little bit. In what I do, I cover a variety of things. When I work in the restaurants, I work in restaurant refrigeration. That's my main priority, right? I cover air conditioning, refrigeration, ice machines, exhaust fans, heating components. I do not do fryers. I do not do ovens, the hot side equipment. Okay. So, exhaust fans are something that I deal with a lot. And I do have to say right now, if you guys have not seen my video that I released on Sunday, I encourage you guys to go watch that. I have to say that is one of my favorite videos I've ever done. Um, Now, it may not be the best edited video, but just for context, that was a very fun service call. You know, when you start getting really, really difficult service calls that have intermittent issues, usually in hindsight, those are some of the best calls. You know, in the moment, they can be very frustrating because you're not able to figure out the problem. But usually, when you can figure out the problem, you can usually reflect on those calls and they turn out to be some of the best. So if you guys haven't already, definitely watch my exhaust fan video. I think the title was It's Just an Exhaust Fan. How hard can it be? But it was just a great, great video. And I'll talk about it a little bit more. But to answer John Deere's question, yes, I have had exhaust fans that have burned through motors. And this was a massive learning experience for me. I was working at a restaurant that I no longer service anymore. It was a chain restaurant. And we had a large, like 2 horsepower motor that kept failing. Now, granted, it was a single phase motor. I hate single phase motors because they have starting components. They have a huge inrush on them. They're just a pain in the butt. They're also more difficult to get in the higher horsepowers too. At my local supply houses, and I'm in a metro area, so it's usually really easy to get 3-phase motors. Single phase motors are a little bit more difficult because they're not used commonly as, you know, very commonly in bigger sizes. Usually single phase motors are 1 horsepower and below, but when you start getting above 1 horsepower, it's a little bit more difficult to find motors. Regardless, we had an exhaust fan that kept burning through motors. So I changed one motor. Then a couple weeks later, the motor went bad again. Now, this was in my infancy of my career, so I really didn't know a whole lot, and I was kind of confused. There was no motor starter on the equipment, and it was just confusing the heck out of me. So I went back in, I installed another motor, and then that motor failed like a week later. And it's like, what is going on? Okay, here's what was happening was that particular customer was not having anybody maintain their grease ducts, and the wheel on the exhaust fan was caked with grease. And when the wheels on the exhaust fans are caked with grease, they can lead to really interesting problems that can lead to intermittent issues. Okay, in certain situations, if you come in during the day when it's really warm, the exhaust fan might be running great because as the kitchen equipment heats up, it starts to melt the grease and it liquefies and it'll fall down into the bottom of the fan. But then as the equipment starts to run, it starts pulling that grease because it kind of warms up the grease and kind of turns it into an aerosol in a way and pulls it up through the exhaust fan. Now, the purpose is that grease is actually supposed to get stuck down in the grease filters, but we can talk about that another day. So in this situation, what was happening was if you would come early in the morning and you'd work on the equipment, it would overamp, but later in the day it wouldn't, because the grease would harden, it would get thick on the wheel, and then it would be hard when the exhaust fan got up to full speed. It would start overamping and causing issues. Okay. So long story short, I went through, I think it was 2 motors total. I went through 2 motors, and then come to find out that the wheel was damaged because it was so full of grease. Okay. Now, this is an interesting problem because this particular fan was so big, because it had a 2 horsepower motor on it, that you couldn't hinge it. So I had to get multiple people there, and it didn't have proper hinges. And that's a whole nother thing we can go into dealing with kitchens, because oftentimes customers will install their own equipment. They install these giant exhaust fans that have these chintzy little hinges, and they can just be a problem. I've literally had exhaust fans that are so big that when you hinge them, the base plate where the hinge attaches to, the metal just folds when you go to lift up the exhaust fan, because they're so big and so heavy, because the manufacturer of said fan didn't design it properly and didn't have a proper hinge system on there. It's just a whole nother issue. But yes, I have had fans that have burnt through motors consistently. And what I have found in that situation was that it was actually because the fan was caked with grease, and that was causing some serious issues. So it's so important to understand how exhaust fans work, how the grease system works, and exhaust fans need to be maintained by grease cleaning companies. There's professional grease cleaning companies that will clean the exhaust fans, and it takes a long time. Hold on just a second. Oh, okay, there we go. Gotcha. So, yeah, and they're supposed to be maintained on a regular basis by other companies. Okay. I do not do grease cleaning. So, also showed a recent video when I was gone. I had all those videos while I was at HR. They were all scheduled to post. So it's hard for me to remember all the different ones because I worked on them over the last few weeks. But I also had a video that had a failed upper bearing. And when I lifted up the exhaust fan, you could see that the wheel was just caked with char, because it was a char broiler and they cook a lot of burgers in it and stuff. So maintaining the equipment is so important. And we're going to start to notice, and I'm starting to notice more and more, that these customers that don't do preventative maintenance, man, I'm going to have a busy summer from a lot of these customers. And it's going to be interesting, because I've got some customers that have equipment ordered, you know, because sometimes they purchase their own equipment, and they've got equipment ordered and it's scheduled to be delivered like in August, and it's their main kitchen AC, you know. And I've got one that it's a 15-ton unit and it only has one compressor working, and that one compressor sounds like it's going to die tomorrow. It's crazy, some of this equipment, and it's going to be a busy summer of repairing a lot of stuff. I don't know about you guys, but I'm really starting to see part shortages. Hey, Scott, thanks so much for that super chat, man. I really appreciate it. Scott says smash the like button, and please do. It really does help out the stream. So HVAC rookie Scott is my buddy that we were hanging out at AHR together. So Scott's a cool dude. All right. Yeah, when you guys see my videos, if you guys like videos, you know, the YouTube algorithm's being really weird right now, and it's not recommending stuff, and it's not showing stuff. It's not notifying people. YouTube is kind of on crack right now. So if you guys see something, do me a favor. If you guys like the video, share it with your friends, send them a link, share it in social media, wherever you want to do so. Anytime you guys get the opportunity, let people know if you think these videos are worth their watch. Help the channel grow. That'd be great. Okay. I'd really appreciate you guys on that one. Let's see. So Andrew had emailed me and he asked me for advice on how to be a better service technician. So he's just getting started out in the trade, and he just wants to know if I have any tips or words of advice, words of encouragement to help him be a better service tech. And I do. This can go out to everybody out there. Be humble. That's one of the most important things. Be observant and know when to keep your mouth shut. Okay. What I mean by that is when you're on a job, when you're working with a senior mechanic, there's a time and place for questions. Sometimes when you guys are heavy in a compressor change out and people are all working and they're doing everything, that may or may not be the right time for a question. So save your questions, and don't be offended if when you're working with someone, if they tell you, you know what, let's talk about that later, because you're in the moment. Okay. So as a junior technician, as an apprentice, when you're coming up in the trade, start to predict what your senior tech is going to need. If you're working with someone or your mentor or whatever, start to predict. You may be their gopher. You may be going to the van, grabbing tools, different stuff like that. And you may think that that is just a horrible thing to do, when in fact you are learning. Because if you're working on me with the jobs, or working with me on a job site, and I'm asking you to go to my van to get things, you should be learning from those moments, and you should be starting to predict what I'm going to need. especially if you've been working with me or your senior tech for a very long time. Compressor changeouts, you start thinking in your head, okay, we're going to take up these first initial items. And then as you're going down to the van to go get other things, I'm giving advice on how to be a better service tech. So starting, and this can go for apprentices or experienced service technicians, when you go down to the van to get something, for me, it's difficult, but I find it to work best. Take something down with you. Every time you go down to get something, if you can, take something else down. So that way at the end of the job, you don't have to spend 2 hours roping everything down from the roof. So try to start being more efficient. Every time I finish a service call, I reflect on that service call and I think, how could I have done that better? And oftentimes in hindsight, you can always come up with ways that you could have done the call better. Your memory will help you on the next one, because the next time you do a similar call to that, you're going to think, you know what? The last time I said I should have done this. So really pay attention when you're a tech on these jobs, reflect on these jobs, try to think how you could have made them go better. Even if you're an apprentice, ask your senior tech or whoever you're working with, say, hey, you know what? This was interesting. I felt like, it got a little weird at this point in the job, like, and talk about things. Okay. But as an apprentice, like I said in the beginning, you also have to know when to keep your mouth shut, because there's a time and a place for questions. Okay. For apprentices and new guys that are in the trade too, when you're on a roof, if you see equipment that, even if you're not working on it, that you don't understand, when and if possible, take pictures of that equipment, take pictures of the models and serial numbers. And I say when and if possible, because sometimes you could be working on government jobs or certain locations when you're not allowed to take pictures. Don't ever take your phone out if you're not allowed to do so. Okay. But if you are allowed to do so, take pictures of said equipment. And when you go home, your job does not stop. You go home, and that's when you start researching. You start thinking about the day. You start reflecting. You start looking into things. If you saw your senior tech doing something, you're like, hey, wait, why didn't we do this step? School taught me that, you do an evacuation and you pull down to this level. Well, how come we didn't pull down to that level? It's okay to ask those questions to your senior tech, and they may tell you, there's a time and place to have a perfect vacuum. Sometimes you can't always be perfect. Okay. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Just know when to ask them. Okay. So that's one step of being a better technician. Now, for the experienced guys, I already covered this. Just try to be more efficient. Right. So every time you do a job, try to remember, try to, take tools down with you, bring tools up when needed, and just try to plan things out. I myself, when I'm doing bigger jobs, when I have other technicians with me, I tend to get to the job site early. I'm usually the first person on the job site, typically get there an hour to a half an hour early, depending on the situation, because I panic if I'm ever late. I always like to be the first person on the job. I'll usually walk the job, start evaluating things, kind of coming up with a plan of attack. Now, in some sense, when I'm doing big jobs, I do like to plan things out, but there's always some last minute decisions that have to be made on the job site. And when you're doing a job walk, you can kind of prepare for that stuff. Okay. So that's kind of some of the advice that I have to be a better service technician. But remember to stay humble. Even if you're the greatest service technician at your company, I can guarantee you're not the greatest service technician in the country, nor will you ever be. But you can always strive to be the best, right? You can always strive to do your best. You will never know everything. We're always constantly learning. I learn from you guys. You guys leave me feedback in my videos. You often say, hey, you know what? You could have done this differently, or this is how I attack this. Hey, I take all that feedback. I take constructive criticism. If you can tell me how I can make my job easier in the future, even though it may hurt my pride in the short term, it'll help me in the long term. So I grow from constructive criticism. So remember that we can all grow from constructive criticism. We can all learn from each other, and we will never know everything. Okay. So let me look at the chat and see. How do I rate Heatcraft QRC? Gregory Went. I work with a lot of the Heatcraft stuff, and there's some strict instructions that you have to follow when you're installing QRC systems or intelligence systems or beacon systems. But once they're installed properly, they work great. Okay. But there's some really important things. And if you're like me, a type of person that typically doesn't read instructions, if you're installing any of this new high efficiency evaporator coils and refrigeration equipment, you're going to have a problem because you need to read the installation instructions. Trust me, I've learned it the hard way. Okay. I've got lots of videos showing mistakes of improperly installed equipment. I've ruined pressure transducers because I overpressurized them. I've done all kinds of things. Okay. So take the information and the advice that I give you in my videos, because it's usually from some sort of horrible past experience that I've made mistakes on. And if I can help you not make those same mistakes, hey, I feel like a good person. So let me see what I got going on in the chat real quick. Guys, if you do have questions, feel free to throw it in the chat. Put it in caps lock. I'll try to get to it. It's kind of hard to see everything. So if I miss your questions, feel free to send me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com. Okay. Let's see what else I missed in the chat. Remember, throw them in caps lock if you have things. Let's see. Yeah, so Jason Johnson says, shut up for a little while. When we're done, we'll talk about it. And he's talking about that apprentice to senior level relationship. And that's true, okay, to an extent. When we're in the middle of a heated job, we're in a compressor change out. It's not the time to ask questions because I've got my hands in something and I'm busy. But for me, I have to remember, and I'll say this to all you senior level techs too, remember that you were once a beginner. You were once ignorant. You were once naive to the way that things work. So everybody has to grow. So remember and have patience with the younger guys. Okay. I have to say that I was on a job site today working on an ice machine, and another vendor came in to work on a different piece of equipment in the restaurant. And I have to say, I was kind of blown away because I saw a senior level technician walk in, and then I saw 3 apprentices walk in behind him. So this senior level tech was trying to train 3 apprentices at the same time. And mind you, they were working in a small space in a restaurant, and it was crowded over there. It's really interesting. We are hurting for technicians right now, and companies are resorting to training 3 apprentices to 1 senior level tech right now. That is just flipping crazy. And I feel for that senior tech because, man, he's got his work cut out for him because I saw what he was trying to train. Let's just put it there. Okay. I'm going to leave it there, but whew, man, he had his work cut out for him. All right. So let's see what else we got going on in here. Sometimes it sucks to be smart, but not know what the right answer is. Oh yeah. Cyborg sheep. Yeah. I mean, I would consider myself to be somewhat knowledgeable when it comes to light commercial refrigeration and air conditioning, but there's times that I get my butt handed to me. So for those that are coming in here right now, recently I talked about this in the very beginning. Well, first off, the studio is backwards. I'm going to address that right now. It's because my camera and everything's still messed up from AHR. So forgive me for that. I still got to figure some things out. I'm running off of YouTube Live right now, and I'm not using my streaming software because I couldn't get the audio to work right. So I apologize for that. We'll get things figured out and hopefully be back on a normal stream soon. But if you guys haven't already seen my video, I said it already, my video that I released on Sunday, I genuinely have to tell you guys that is one of my favorite service calls I have done probably in the entire previous year. It was absolutely a fun service call. You need to watch the video. Please share it with all your friends. Help that video get some exposure because I think there was some great lessons in that video. And it was how not to just stop at the first thing that you find. I was trying to find an intermittent problem as to why a motor starter kept tripping for an exhaust fan. And it was a little difficult to find, but I finally figured it out. And you have to stay to the closing words because that's when I really talk about what I thought the real issue was. I kind of addressed it in the video, but I really covered it in the closing words. And it's very interesting where we were led in that video. So the video was called the video was called It's Just an Exhaust Fan, How Hard Can It Be? So please go check that out if you didn't already. Recommend it. Share it to people that you think would enjoy that video too. That was a very, very interesting one. What award did I win when I was in Vegas? So in Vegas, I went to the HVAC Tactical Awards and I was very honored. I had no idea, but I had booked my tickets long before way early in advance to the HVAC Tactical Awards. They gave me this amazing pendant right here. And it says, never stop mastering your craft. This thing probably weighs a good half a pound. I mean, this thing's solid, super thick, really, really nice. It says HVAC Tactical and it has an inscription on the backside. It was an awards event put on by the HVAC Tactical brand. If you guys haven't heard about that brand, my buddy Ben, he's the creator of it. You definitely want to go check it out. Just look up HVAC Tactical on Instagram, hvactactical.com. Great place. Solder Weld helped him, and there was many other sponsors. So I think the award that I actually won that they gave me at the event was maybe best social content, I think is what it was, something like that. So I was very honored. I never expected to win anything. It was just cool to be able to go to an event like that. Vegas, I'd been looking forward to Vegas, and it was so awesome. And they did such a great job. Mark my words, the HVAC Tactical Awards will be double the size in Atlanta, because the next AHR trade show will be in Atlanta in 2023. And mark my words, they will double in size, guaranteed, because they did such a great job. And it was such a great awards event, and there's going to be tons more people that jump on board with it. Such a great concept for recognizing technicians that normally wouldn't be recognized, for normal techs, normal people that do normal stuff, right? Now, granted, they did give me an award, and I am, somewhat known on YouTube and stuff, but many awards were given to people that were just normal service technicians in the trade. And it's such a great little thing to be recognized, and it's awesome. So thank you so very much to Ben and Lance from Solder Weld, Ben from HVAC Tactical. You guys did a great job with that event. I know Ben put in a ton of work, and I know Lance with Solder Weld also helped out. So that was a really, really cool event. I was very humbled to be a part of it. So let's see, man, I'm still having issues with my throat. Like, ever since being sick like 4 weeks ago, and then Vegas, it was just so hard. I got some hot tea right here to help me out. So I said it in the beginning, I'll say it again. If all goes well and everything's looking really good, I will be going to the HVACR training symposium for HVAC school in Claremont, Florida. What is it, like next week, in like a week and a half or a week or something like that? It's going to be awesome. It's going to be in Claremont, Florida. I will be there. So stay tuned. Follow my social media if you're in the area. Let's see, Jason H. Now, I originally planned on showing pictures of this, but I can't. So Jason H sent me some really cool pictures of a walk-in freezer that he's having a lot of problems with. Again, I planned on showing pictures and doing a screen share, but I'm having issues with my streaming software, so that's not going to happen right now. But he sent me pictures of a walk-in freezer that has ice all over the ceiling. When you guys have walk-in freezers that have all kinds of ice issues, you need to pay attention, whether or not it's ice on the evaporator coil, whether it's ice on the ceilings, ice on the door frame. Pay attention to the ice and stare at it for a little while. And I can actually look at Jason's pictures, and I can tell that he's having moisture intrusion issues. Okay. So he's having warm air coming into his walk-in freezer, and it's naturally gravitating towards the evaporator coil, because the evaporator coil is trying to absorb all the heat from the equipment, right? It's going to be the coldest thing in that box. So the heat's naturally going to be attracted to the coil. And then it's got fans to help move that heat across. And if you pay attention to the pictures that you sent me, Jason, again, I'm sorry I can't show these on the live stream right now. If you pay attention to the pictures that you sent me, the ice that's forming on your box, you can clearly tell that it's moisture being blown out of the evaporator coil. So there's a couple different things that can be causing that. Number one, it looks like you have warm air coming into the box. Judging by the pictures that you sent me, Jason, some of the inner gaskets that go between the panels of the actual walk-in box itself seem like they're coming out. I would highly encourage you, Jason, to take a thermal imaging camera and go inside your box and look at all the seams and look to find where the warm spot is. Make sure you close the walk-in freezer door, go inside and look at the door also. But clearly from your picture, you have some sort of warm air coming into the box. It is condensing and then blowing out across the box is what's happening. Okay. So what other things can cause ice on the box of a walk-in freezer? One of the biggest issues is defrost termination issues. If your defrost is running too long, what's going to happen is you have excessive moisture buildup, because that ice or the frost is gonna melt, right? And then that water's got to go somewhere. So there's a couple different things that your equipment does to try to prevent that water from blowing out of the evaporator coil. Number one, we have a defrost termination switch that's not going to let the evaporator coil get too warm, typically about 50 to 55 degrees evaporator coil temperature. That's not air temperature in the box, because oftentimes walk-in freezers will have electric strip heat. Okay. Sometimes they have hot gas defrost, but majority of them in the light commercial sector are going to have electric strip heat. With electric strip heat, if the coil gets too warm, you're really going to start to melt things and cause issues. But we typically have a defrost termination switch that's set to come out about 55 degrees. and that will turn the equipment back on, even if the time has not finished for the defrost cycle, right? The defrost termination switch usually sends a signal up to the defrost clock that terminates defrost. Now, there's another safety feature in that evaporator coil, and that is a fan delay switch. Because when we come out of a defrost, we do not want the evaporator fan motors to immediately turn on. If the evaporator fan motors immediately turn on, all that condensation that had been dripping off that coil will blow out of the coil in little water droplets and stick to the ceiling and cause like steam to come out, and it'll just immediately refreeze and cause a lot of ice issues. So that is another thing that can cause a lot of ice, is if the defrost termination switch is not working and or the fan delay switch is not working. Now, sometimes the defrost termination and the fan delay are encapsulated in a 3-wire clicks-on device. So it basically acts as one single control, and it controls defrost termination and fan delay. Sometimes with some manufacturers, they have a separate defrost termination and a separate fan delay. So those are important things. But one of the most important things in a walk-in freezer is you want to make sure you do not have any warm air leaking into that box through line set penetrations, drain line penetrations. It's imperative that on a walk-in freezer that there's a P-trap on the drain line outside of the box. You do not want a P-trap on the inside of the freezer, because that can lead to a catastrophe, okay? Unless it's massively insulated and has good heaters on it. Typically, you want a drain line running out of the box. You want a P-trap outside of the box, and then you're going to wrap a heater even still on the drain line inside the box. But you want the P-trap outside of the box, so that way warm air doesn't come in through the drain line, because that is another problem that can happen in walk-in freezers. Okay, so hopefully with a few of those things, Jason, you can kind of get to the bottom of your walk-in freezer issue. If the things that I've given you, the ideas that I've given you haven't helped you, feel free to reach out again. We can talk a little bit more. Okay, all right, let's get to the chat and see what we going on here. Not seeing anything in there, seeing what I'm missing. Yeah, if you guys haven't already, please smash the like button, guys. It'll definitely help out the stream. Hello to everybody. Sorry the stream's messed up right now, because yeah, it's a whole nother thing. I've got camera issues and all kinds of stuff right here. Going through the chat, what caused the burnt wires on that motor starter? Voltage surges. John Cantwell. So in my video that I released on Sunday, again, if you guys haven't seen it, definitely go check it out. It's one of my favorite videos I've made in a long time, and I don't think it's quite getting the attention that I think it can really help some people out, because it's a really interesting video. So what caused the burnt wires in that system? Well, number one, I think that the extra contactor that is up in the attic was causing all the issues. But I also think that that is not making good contact, causing low voltage, which is causing all kinds of issues with our equipment, potentially leading to motor starter failure. But I did say that in the past, about 1.5 years ago at that location, we had a lot of electrical issues. So some of those burnt wires might actually be previous from old issues. They had a lot of electrical problems, and they ended up having to replace an entire electrical panel because of this. It was a giant nightmare at that location. So some of the damage could have been from then too. So let's see what else we got going on in the chat. Let's see. The Jammer said, thank you very much for that super chat. You said, sorry you couldn't attend the ACR. Oh, right on. All those rooftop and splits. Did I get the stat hooked up on that exhaust fan? No, the customer has not approved me installing that new thermostat yet. I did bring it up to the customer, but it's in their hands. So I do want to address this too. Let me take a drink of my tea. When I'm in my, these restaurants, if I see something that's against building code, what do I do about it? Right? Do I report it to the building authorities? It would take a lot for me to have to report one of my customers to the police, to health inspectors, or to building authorities. Okay. I try to stay in my lane. Now, of course, if I saw something life-threatening, yeah, I would feel obligated and have a moral obligation to report said issues to the building department or the health department or something like that. But I would not go there first. The first thing I would do is address it with the customer or go over the customer's head. Before I reported something to a building inspector, I would definitely go over the on-site management's head and report it to their bosses or the owner of the business. In my situation, I deal with a lot of corporate restaurants. So if I ever saw something that was just insane, I would definitely go to the corporate office and say, look, this is getting to the point that I feel like I need to let someone know, and address it in that level. I have never in a situation gone to report my customer to building authorities or anything like that. You are walking a slippery slope if you start doing that, and you will be alienated as a contractor. That's just a nightmare. So you don't want to go down that path unless it's a life-threatening issue and something like that. So no, I don't go and report that. So I just report to my customer, let them know, hey, these are the issues. These things need to be fixed. This can be an issue. Document everything and make the customer sign off on everything. Tell them to call. So that's why in that situation, in that video, I said, get an electrician involved, because then another person's involved and it's not just me. So now there's an electrician saying, hey, this isn't up to code. And I let him deal with that because he's the electrician, right? I'm just the HVAC service technician. So I leave it in his hands. I'll tell him to get the fire suppression company involved, get them involved, let them deal with their thing, right? So I just kind of stay in my lane and do my stuff. I'm not trying to lose customers over something like this. What about, oh no, no. Will Speed said, what about cats and microwaves? What I call PETA. If you guys don't know, you need to watch the HVAC overtime show. Okay. That's all I'm going to say. I do not condone putting cats in microwaves or anything like that, but you need to watch the HVAC overtime show. There's a lot that goes on the HVAC overtime show on Friday evenings at 6:05 p.m. Pacific with my buddies. So you definitely have to watch that show. Will Speed is obviously a normal viewer of the HVAC overtime show. So it's kind of an inside joke. Let's see what else we got. All right. When you're working on these job sites, when I'm working on exhaust fans, because I work on them a lot, in a perfect world, I have fancy laser alignment tools and all these fancy things to help me make sure that pulleys are aligned and belts are straight, and deflection tools to make sure belts are properly tensioned. But it's not always practical that you can use that stuff. Okay. So I don't work on heavy industrial. I don't work on really critical equipment. So for the most part, I can actually do a lot with my eye and using reference points to make sure that things are aligned. So if you're trying to figure out if pulleys are aligned and stuff to get you close within ballpark of being 100%, you can usually use reference points. Okay. So find something that's straight and level on the roof, and, position your head to look at a motor pulley in a way that you can reference something else that's on the roof, or look at one motor pulley like you're looking through a sight. And when you're looking through a sight and you're looking down the barrel of a sight, you line up the two sights and you use the two sights as a reference point, and then you find something in the sight that you want to lock on with, right? It's kind of the same thing when you're looking at pulleys. If you're trying to align pulleys, put a belt on there, turn it on for a few minutes, and look at how the belt is riding in the pulleys. Look at each individual pulley. Is the belt kind of crooked in one? Does the pulley look cockeyed? I mean, there's so many different things that you can actually see with your naked eye as long as you really start paying attention. You're not just walking up and saying that pulley's not lined up. I'm looking at things and using them as a reference point to help me to align things, okay? And of course, there's a time and place to get laser alignment tools and different stuff like that out too, okay? Belt tension tools, deflection tools. I have them, honestly, probably have a deflection tool. I swear I had a deflection tool right here at one point. I don't know where it is. I swear I had a deflection tool. Yeah, it's going to make a liar out of me. I have a deflection tool somewhere in this office, but you can check belt tension. You basically take the width of the belt. You find the proper deflection for that belt based off of the width and the pulley span and different things like that, and make sure that it's properly tensioned. And I will say that there's a lot of truth in the fact that if you don't properly tension belts, you're going to cause a lot of damage. A loose belt, in my opinion, is going to ruin an adjustable motor pulley a lot faster than a properly tensioned belt. Okay. And an overly tightened belt is going to ruin bearings and motors really fast, or it's going to break a belt, or it's going to cause the belt to get stuck in the pulley. So we need to make sure that we're working on this equipment and we know how it's supposed to properly work. And there's a time and place for following proper practices. Okay. Sometimes you can't always be perfect though, and you have to just do your best with the tools that you have. I already talked about that. That's a good question. Actually, I already talked about that one too. See, I'm covering a lot of these topics. I had a really good question today that actually just came through this morning. So, here in Southern California, we don't know what cold is. Okay. We genuinely don't. Our average winter temperature is 55 to 65 degrees. I mean, come on. I realize that's not even cold, right? Because I know you Midwest guys, you up north guys, you back east guys, you guys are freezing your butts off right now, and we're over here freezing our butts off with beanies and UGG boots on and shorts, by the way, because it's 55 degrees outside. Okay. But being that we have a mild climate, we have mild winters, why in the heck do we actually have head pressure control valves on our equipment? Why don't we just run without head pressure control valves, or fan cycling or different things like that? When you start sizing your equipment properly, and the more efficient that equipment gets, the more you actually need to control head pressure. Oftentimes in the past, we would just wing it. We wouldn't have any kind of head pressure control valves or devices on our equipment. But nowadays, it's getting more and more needed. Okay. Now, it's always been needed, but it's just in how you size your equipment. The way an expansion valve works, a thermostatic expansion valve, is that it needs a pressure differential. You need a big difference between the outlet of the valve and the inlet of the valve in order for that mechanical valve to be able to open and close and control the flow of refrigerant. And if you don't have that pressure differential, that high side and that process side of that expansion valve, if you don't have the proper pressure differential, then that valve cannot work properly. That's why we need head pressure control. That's why we have to maintain certain head pressures or certain pressure differentials so the expansion valve can work properly. It's also important, and I've been discussing this a lot, and I'll be discussing it at the HVACR training symposium for HVAC school here in a couple weeks or in a week or whatever it is, about the new AWEF standards, the annual walk-in energy efficiency factors that the Department of Energy is mandating across the country. Guys, if you don't already know, there's going to be a lot of changes happening to your refrigeration equipment. You're going to start seeing 2-speed evaporator fan motors. You're going to start seeing them floating the head pressure down, head pressure control valves that don't bypass until 150 psi. There's lots of things going in, and it makes it so critical that we're sizing our equipment right. Okay. It's so important. So we do have a need for head pressure control, even in mild climates. And I would actually argue that we actually run into a few more issues because we're in a mild climate, but that's a whole nother conversation for another day. How on earth do the restaurants that I work at pass health inspections? Guys, the health department is a complete joke. Okay. The health department is so overwhelmed. The restaurants are overwhelmed. They don't even keep up. Health departments will randomly fail people for weird things that they pass other people for. It's just a nightmare. So, general health department, I mean, they do a decent job of like making sure that, there's not egregious violations, but things that they used to cite people for, they don't anymore right now. They're just trying to give these restaurants a fighting chance. And there's an argument to be made that that's ridiculous that they're giving them leeway, but that's too political to even get involved in that. Let me look at the chat and see what I'm missing in here real quick. Did I end up doing that job for the walk-in cooler with the missing coil? Primetime? No, never heard from that customer again. I'm kind of curious if they actually saw my video. But no, that's the customer that they asked me to go give them a quote. And then I was just like, you guys are nuts. And they were going to be open before January. In fact, you know what? I need to look up and see if that restaurant's even open. I bet you they're not open. There's no way they could have opened even by now. I don't see anything right now, but I'll have to look it up later to see if they opened yet. But no, I did not do anything else with that job. All right. Let's look in here. R290. And I've made it pretty public, and I'll make it even more public. When I'm working on R290, I've instructed all my employees, not all I don't have that many employees. I only have 4 people, including myself. We're a very small company. So I've instructed my other service mechanic and my apprentice that's working with me that when we're working on R290, we are no longer cutting off the process stubs when we are done repairing said R290 equipment. I don't care if it's under warranty or not. We're not cutting them off. We're leaving process stubs on there. We're just going to go ahead and mark those process stubs with like red tape or something just to make it obvious that it's an R290 system. So if you follow proper practices when you're working hydrocarbon refrigerants, they want you to cut off the process stub when there's still refrigerant in the system, weld it shut. That way, nobody accidentally puts their gauges on the equipment. But there's a massive safety issue. The reason why I stopped doing that is because of the safety potential, right? There's a potential for pinching the line off, and I've used several different types of pinch off tools, and they always leak. So from this point forward, we're not cutting off process stubs anymore. I'm taking a stand, we're leaving them on, and that's just how it's going to be. Okay. You know, I love following manufacturers' recommended practices, but I just don't want any of my guys getting hurt and having to cut those off and weld them shut with refrigerant in there. Certainly, I've done it hundreds of times, but I just don't want the liability of someone getting hurt when they're doing it. So I'm taking a stand and I'm not doing it anymore. Let me see what else we got going on in the chat. Is Jill enjoying the pineapple stuff from AHR? Yeah, my wife got a kick out of that. A few people, Will Speed gave me a pineapple koozie, and then Jessica Egan came up and gave me and my wife pineapple socks, which was just kind of a funny joke. If you guys, again, don't understand the inside joke of the pineapple references, you definitely need to go over to the HVAC Overtime channel, because there's a lot that goes on the HVAC Overtime show that'll give you a lot of context to some of the inside jokes and stuff. So when you're working on refrigeration equipment, what kind of evaporator and condenser TDs do you want on said equipment? Good question. I don't have the person that wrote it down written, but I know I emailed you and told you I'd be talking about it. So when it comes to, and I'm kind of elaborating on your question too, when it comes to evaporators, it really depends on what kind of product they're storing inside the box. So the TD, what is the TD? That is the difference between the saturated temperature and the center of that evaporator coil. Okay. Keep in mind, with high glide refrigerants, we now have a midpoint temperature. So we typically will use the midpoint temperature for the evaporator TD. Okay. So be careful about that. But we take the saturated temperature of the evaporator, we compare it to the return air temperature, the air entering that evaporator, and we come up with our temperature differential or across that. Okay. So typically for general product in a walk-in cooler, they're going to design an evaporator with a 10-degree TD, but that TD may change dependent on what the customer's storing in the box. The TD may change for things like flowers that have high humidity, because we don't want to dry flowers out. I did work for a bakery one time, and they were having issues with it was way too humid in the walk-in box, and they had TD issues, right? The equipment was not sized correctly. So it really depends on how the system was designed and set up to run. But on average, for general products, for a walk-in freezer and a walk-in cooler, we're typically going to run a 10-degree evaporator TD. Okay. Knowing that we have a 10-degree TD can tell us what our pressures should be when that equipment is working properly. But it's very important to understand something. A TD can be a fluid number, because if you have a single component refrigerator or compressor, right? You have one compressor, and out here in the Southern California area, we typically have some really hot summers and some very mild winters, right? So we may have a 2 horsepower compressor, right? That is required for the BTU output for the summertime heat. But in the wintertime, that compressor will double in size sometimes, because the condensing temperature drops. And on a refrigeration system, as the condensing temperature moves up and down, so does the BTU output of that compressor. Okay. So as we drop our condensing temperatures from the winter to the summer, all of a sudden we have a really low condensing temp, and that can cause our equipment to be massively oversized, which can massively affect your evaporator TD and lead to freeze up issues and different stuff like that. Definitely something that we'll be talking about a little bit more at the HVACR training symposium when I do my talk out there too. So some things to understand. Now, as far as a condenser TD, you know, it changes from customer to customer and equipment to equipment. You typically will see about a 20-degree condenser TD, but if it's a microchannel coil, I've seen as low as 15 degrees. It's an older, less efficient tube and fin coil, I've seen as high as 30-degree condenser TD. So it just depends and can change from equipment manufacturer to equipment manufacturer. I already talked about that one. You know, and I already talked about that one too. Cool. I'm doing good. Crossing off my list right here. Let's see what we got going on in the chat. Jason Johnson says you have summer, not summer. California doesn't qualify for winter. That is correct. California does not know what winter is, and we do not know what humidity is either. Okay. Let's see. Any guesses on what the humidity is today? I'm going to look it up right now in my area. So the humidity in my area at my house at this given moment right now is 8% outside, 8% relative humidity outside. So it's extremely dry. We do not know what humidity is. If we see 50% relative humidity outside, we lose our minds here. Okay. So we just don't know. We're used to extremely dry air. Yep. 8%. That is what the humidity is at my house right now. 8%. It is nuts. What was the most interesting thing I've ever seen? Brody's Media Group. That's a really hard question to answer. I've worked on some interesting things. I've got some cool stories to tell. I've worked in hospital morgues before. Those are always interesting. Those are always fun ones. I've talked about this story before, but I've had calls from a hospital like 911 at 2:00 in the morning. They're like, the morgue cooler's at 50 degrees. We need you here now. And it's like, then I'll ask them on the phone, they call them passengers, right? So they'll say it's a 2-passenger cooler or a 4-passenger cooler. And I'll be like, is it fully loaded? And they're like, yeah, it has 4 passengers in it. I'm like, well, these are small coolers. Like, they all need to be gone before I get there. I've told this story, but it still makes me laugh. And the person on the other end of the line is like, well, what do you want me to do with the bodies? And I'm like, I don't care, but I can't work on it with bodies in it. So you need to make them disappear. We're not talking about a walk-in. We're talking about a 4-passenger, 8-door cooler that's double-sided. So, I mean, these things have to be gone for me to access the evaporators and stuff. I finally got there, and I don't know what he did with the bodies, but there was 4 bodies in that morgue cooler, and they were gone. And I've still to this day wondered where he put them. I'm like, did some like poor orderly like turn a hallway in a closet and be like, oh my God, there's 4 bodies in here? Like, I don't know what he did with them, but we have all kinds of cool, interesting stories to tell. Let's see. But as far as the most interesting thing I've ever seen, I mean, as of Sunday, the video that I edited on Sunday was one of my favorite videos to edit because it was a really, really frustrating, unique service call. So, I mean, it's always, that's probably the most interesting thing I have right now, but it changes. It's fluid. I probably don't even remember half the cool stuff I've seen. So let's see what else we got going on in here. Looking at the chat right now, you're going to be an HVAC helper this summer. Give any advice? Joshua Timmons, have fun, man. It's going to be a great summer. You're going to make good money and you're going to be super busy. Just pay attention, observe, and learn. And every day when you're working out there, Joshua, try to be a better technician the next day. There's always room for improvement. Every single day you can improve on the last day. So the first day is going to be rough. You're not going to know what you're doing. The next day after that's going to get a little bit easier, and so on and so on. Just try to be an observant tech, try to take lots of pictures, ask lots of questions when it's appropriate, and you will do great, bud. Okay. All right. Let's see what else we got going on in here. Let me see. Best pinch off tool is behind. All right. Can you be an HVAC helper without having your license? Joshua, it just depends where you are wanting to work. In Southern California, you don't need any license to work. You just need an EPA certification. So am I talking about 454 equipment or something else for the 2 speeds? Matt A. 2 speeds. Okay, so let's talk about the AWEF stuff. So federal mandate across the United States, walk-in coolers, 2,000 square feet or less have to meet certain energy requirements, okay? In California, we're not allowed to use 404A refrigerants on major retrofits or new installations anymore. Major retrofit in Southern California is a major component replacement, and a major component is described as an expansion valve, an evaporator, a condenser, or a compressor, the main components of the system. You can fix leaks and top off with 404, but if you have to change any of the major components, you're not allowed to use 404 anymore. Does that mean everybody's changing over? No, because that's not very practical sometimes. But on new installations, you're technically not supposed to use 404A anymore. You're supposed to use some other refrigerant. My refrigerant of choice is 448A. But the 2-speed evaporators, those do not apply to just one refrigerant. It's all refrigeration equipment under 2,000 square feet, walk-in boxes or less. They have to meet certain energy requirements. 2-speed evaporator fan motors is not, and see the AWEF requirements from the Department of Energy. It's not that they came in and said you have to have 2-speed evaporator fan motors. No. They didn't approach it that way. They went to the equipment manufacturers and they said, your equipment has to be designed to meet these energy efficiency numbers. Like, it has to meet this. How the manufacturer gets to that number, the Department of Energy could care less. They just want them to meet energy requirements. So each manufacturer is kind of left to their own devices to do whatever they need to do. But there's only so much you can do on this equipment because you typically don't have capacity control on the light commercial, 2,000 square foot or less. So they pretty much all have 2-speed evaporator fan motors. Although Heatcraft, I don't think has 2-speed evaporator fan motors, but that's a whole nother conversation. They typically will all be floating their head pressure down. They're reducing the liquid pressure of the system, floating the condensing temperatures way down because that's higher compression ratios. That's more energy. They're usually adding extra subcooling circuits, different things like that. So they're kind of all doing the same stuff for the most part. This is where electronic expansion valves are becoming very, very popular because as you're floating the head pressure down, you have a little more room for a proper expansion valve operation if you have an EEV. Now, Sporlan actually does have a tech document for sizing thermostatically controlled expansion valve. And it's typically going to be balance port valves. You can't use non-balance port valves on this new equipment. You have to use balance port. So one of the most important things that I can't stress enough is, let's say you have a compressor replacement and you decide to change the condensing unit. More than likely, if you go buy a new condensing unit from the supply house, it's going to be AWEF compliant, meaning it's going to have these certain features done to it. So it's not just necessarily a condensing unit replacement anymore. You're probably going to have to, at a minimum, change the expansion valve to go with a balance port valve and make sure it's sized correctly. If you want sizing instructions and different things like that, go to sporlanonline.com, search up AWEF, or you can even just Google search Sporlan, AWEF, and the tech document is like 1010 something or other is going to come up, and it'll help you to size the expansion valves for the AWEF compliant equipment. But it's really important that we understand that because there's a lot of people, I'm seeing a lot of complaints and questions because they're like, why is this equipment? And understand something too. It's not the equipment manufacturers that are doing this. They're being told by the government. Okay. So they're just having to do what they can. Trust me, the equipment manufacturers know there's going to be problems, but they can only do what they can do. And the government's telling them that they have to meet these energy requirements. So therefore, you got to do these things to meet it. All right. Let's see what else we got going on inside here. Get into the chat. How far do I live from RHS in California? RHS, Parker. What do you mean by RHS? Give me some context. RHS is the initials of my high school. I don't know if that's what you mean. I have no idea what you mean by RHS. The high school that I went to was Rubidoux High School, but I don't think that's what you mean. So I don't know what you mean. Feel free to send me an email because I don't know if that's going to get lost in the chat, but this chat goes by so fast, it's hard for me to keep up. So if you have something you want me to talk to, hvacrvideos@gmail.com if I miss you in the chat. So let's see what else we got going on in the chat. What considerations do you have to take to move a thermostat? Oh, really important. That's actually a good question. So considerations you need to move a thermostat is, number one, the wire for the thermostat. Is it going to be long enough to move to a new location? Are you going to have to extend it? Okay. The next thing is the location of the thermostat. You typically don't want it to be an exterior wall on the home. If you do put it on an exterior wall, you need to make sure it has a massive amount of insulation and you're not going to have solar gain on that wall. Because if you put a thermostat on an exterior wall and the sun is shining on that wall, inevitably the heat is going to make it through that wall and it's going to affect the thermostat's operation and could cause temperature issues within your house. Also, moving a thermostat to a new location, you want to pay attention to things that are blowing on the thermostat, or lights or coffee pots or interesting things that can cause that thermostat to get false readings. So there's a lot of considerations in moving a thermostat. You want to make sure you install it properly. I'll tell you a story. My dad, this is from my dad. This isn't from me, but this is something I'll never forget. So he had a service call this is probably 25 years ago, 30 years ago, who knows. It was a service call at a Mexican restaurant, and they would call him and they would say it's freezing in their dining room. This was in the wintertime, a Southern California winter, by the way. Okay. So it was freezing in their dining room. So he'd come out, it happened at nighttime. So he came out the next day, goes through the air conditioner. Air conditioning is working fine. Heating's working fine. He doesn't understand it, Customer calls again. It's freezing in my dining room. Same thing. He goes out there, can't find a single thing wrong. Okay. Long story short, he went out like another 1 or 2 times. I can't remember the story exactly. But what it ended up being was, at the end of the night, in the evening, the restaurant would move a coffee pot underneath the thermostat so that way they can have coffee for the customers. So only at nighttime, the coffee pot would heat up and the heat from the coffee pot would fake out the thermostat, drive the air conditioner on, and freeze the customers out of the building. And it was one of those nuisance calls that finally he got sick of it. The customer never wanted to pay overtime, but he finally got sick and just went out there at nighttime when it was happening and was able to see the dum-dums were putting a coffee pot under the thermostat. Okay. Things like that are considerations you want to take when you're moving a thermostat. You want to make sure you're not going to put it into a position where it's going to be affected by other things in the environment of which it's installed. All right, let's see what else we got going on in here. How do you find a belly size for a unit? Oh, a belt size, and the belt is worn off. Joshua Timmons, that's a good question. So there's tools that they make to measure belts. You can take the belt into a supply house. They can measure them. There's a couple different ways you can do it. I don't know how to convert an actual measurement from like a tape measure or anything like that, but a tape measure really wouldn't work because the belt size would be a lot smaller. So just take the belt into the supply house with you and you can match it up to something, but they do make tools for it too. Refrigeration hardware supply, RHS. Refrigeration hardware supply is nowhere near me. I don't even know that they're in California. I don't think so. I don't know. I don't use refrigeration hardware supply. In the past, I've used Case Parts, but refrigeration hardware supply, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they're in California. All right. What else do we got in here? There is a formula. There you go. Jason Johnson says there's a formula. Yeah, the Browning app. There you go. Trevor Matthews is in here. Refrigeration Mentor. That's right. The Browning app will have the formula. Actually, that's a good point. And it'll probably give you the calculations on how to figure that out too. So there you go. Math for see, that's what the chat's good for. You can always ask the Google or you can ask the chat and they'll give you great ideas. All right, let's see what else. All right. I am going to wrap this one up, guys. There's not going to be any outro music because my streaming software is not working right now. So I'm just going to end this. I really appreciate you guys. Oh, I know there's a bunch of people that are going to ask right now. My dog, he's doing really good. I obviously have been showing my dog a lot on the stream. My dog is currently at doggy boot camp. He'll be there for another 2 weeks. So, or another 10 days or whatever. He was at a 3-week training camp that'll teach him how to be a better dog. And then actually we have to learn how to be better humans too, because we have to go to school or go to training with him too, to learn how to work with him and different things like that. So, but he's doing good. So, do I have many resumes from guys who watch the channel? I actually hired my apprentice right now was someone that watched the channel and he's doing really, really good. So yeah, I've done it before. Have a great night. See you at Kalos. Right on, man. Yeah, I'll definitely see you guys. If you're going to be at Kalos, I will be there at the HVACR training symposium. Yeah. Smash the like button on the way out. I really appreciate you guys. And I'm going to go ahead and hit end stream. We will catch you on the next one. Okay.